this is a very exciting moment for myself and One Life, One Tree. We have David Milarch from the US on the podcast or video call with us. He's an incredibly interesting man, definitely one of the leading authorities in the world on giant sequoias, but also just generally ancient trees. I recently got his book, The Man Who Planted Trees, which I'm working my way through. He's featured on numerous TED Talks and is the co-founder of the Archangel Ancient Tree project, which is fascinating. I might start, David, by just asking, could you give us a bit of a history of yourself and maybe what the Archangel Ancient Tree Archive does?
Yes, I'm from a multi-generational shade tree nursery family. I raised shade trees for 40 years for a living here in northern Michigan. My father raised shade trees. He's gone now. But we began, and my father helped pioneer the shade tree industry after World War II. He served in World War II, was a tail gunner on one of the bomber planes that flew the channel, excuse me, and came home and decided he wanted to try and grow trees for a living for the nursery and for the cities. So he and J. Frank Schmidt, who was also in the Air Force, over there on the other side of the pond, delivering some goods to the Germans, they came home and they pioneered the shade tree industry. Up until then, nurseries went out along the edges of the woods, dug up trees with shovels, brought them back to the nurseries, and grew them for a while. Well, back in 1964, on our multi-generational farm, we have 6 generations that have been on the same piece of land. All of us have been in the shade tree business, so we've been doing it a long time. But back about 30 years ago, the trees that we grew as our bread and butter trees, the trees that we sold to cities and nurseries that worked forever, started failing. And we didn't know why they were failing. And that would be like somebody coming in and taking a quarter of your paycheck every week, and you didn't know where it went. Yeah. So we started working with the universities, and they weren't really sure. And to make a long story short, it was SO2s. It was from coal-fired power plants west of Michigan here. We're the Great Lakes state, surrounded by the Great Lakes. So all the way to, I think it's about 2,000 miles of California, the power plants west of us, then all the way to China. We later traced it to there as the SO2s. It was weakening the immune systems of our trees, and it opened them up for disease, and they were dying. So we were kind of on the leading edge of that, saying, uh-oh, coal-fired power plants are, the trees were like the canary in the mine.
Yeah.
If it weakens their immune system so much, what does it do to humans? What does it do to animals? What is it doing to our forest? Well, fast forward now about 30 years, and I think, I've been searching for big trees in England, and I've found some very large trees in England with people that know where to look. And you're suffering from the same thing. The whole world is. The air pollution that we're breathing, the trees are breathing, in our immune systems, and opening us up for pandemics. Trees release aerosols out of their leaves, old growth trees, that kill pandemic pathogens. We've cut down all of our 98% of our old growth forests here in the United States. You've cut down more than that in England.
Yeah.
And so the trees that aerosol the natural disinfectants to keep everything healthy, we've cut down.
Yeah.
So it's critically important that we put trees back for their aerosols as well as their incredible ability to store CO2. And
98% of America's trees were felled, were they? They're old woods.
98% of our old growth forest is gone. I think in England, it's 99%.
Well, we had to fight the Spanish Armada, so we needed a lot of wood.
Well, you got a lot of that in Ireland for your ships. I know that. I've worked in Ireland. And you went over there and borrowed a lot of their trees to build your ships. So
yeah, that was the maritime empire time. Yeah, different time.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. So, I mean, the importance of trees is critical. I guess that sort of leaves me to how are you guys protecting the oldest species of trees in the world. What are you guys doing to address that issue?
Under our current government and president, one of the very first acts he did 4 years ago when he was elected is open up all federal lands and national parks to old growth logging. So all the protections on the remaining 2 or 3% of our old growth forests, and by the way, 95% of all coast roads have been cut down. There's only 5% of that forest. It was all opened up the first thing when he got elected for loggers to come in and cut down the old growth. So the only thing that we have is hopefully our next president has more wisdom with what's left of our old growth forest. And this is not the blame game. I don't want to pick on politicians or corporations or timber companies. It's too late for that.
Yeah.
The era of preservation is gone, and we failed. This is the era of restoration. Everybody needs to adjust their thinking to let's fix the problem. Okay. And there's only one way to fix that problem is to find the largest, oldest, healthiest trees on the planet, clone them so we have the exact genetic fingerprint so we can study it and utilize them. It's like with a giant sequoia. Most people don't know that a mature giant sequoia weighs between 1,000 and 1,200 tons. And 40% of that dry weight, if you dried it all out, is stored carbon. So there's over 400 tons of stored carbon from the atmosphere in each mature giant sequoia. So you say, that might take 1,000 years or two. Giant sequoias and coast redwoods in ideal situations grow 10 feet a year.
10 feet. I mean, I've read 4 foot in places, but 10 feet sounds incredible. But I know you are the authority. So you've seen that with your own eyes, I guess.
Absolutely. In the suburbs of San Francisco, we planted giant sequoias as well as coast redwoods, not champions like what we do, in the subdivisions in that area. And in 20 years, an 18-inch tall seedling will get to be over 100 feet tall. And at 4 feet breast level, I put my arms around the trunks. I can't touch my hands.
In 20
years.
Incredible.
That's really, really sequestering carbon. That's why we're doing the redwoods.
Amazing. I mean, I can tell you that, our project, One Life, One Tree, is planting giant sequoias to offset people's lifetime footprints, one person at a time. And all of the data I had for planting these in the UK required me to look at equivalent sequoias brought over to the UK around 1850s and their growth rates. And the restriction there for us is that if you plant trees as monument trees in the middle of a field by itself with no microclimate, they don't thrive. But of course, if you plant them in a redwood forest where they're near their parents and they've got the cover and the support of the local ecology, then I can imagine they grow an awful lot quicker, which is why we plant them in groves rather than as independents.
That's very, very wise. Yeah. They don't like to be grown as a specimen all alone.
Yeah.
Well, they're very social trees. And it's the climate, it's the microclimate that a group of them creates.
Yeah.
That microclimate is why they thrive.
Fantastic. Well, how encouraging to hear that our estimates on growth speeds could be improved by planting them in groups, which we're doing. I know in Wales we're doing 500, in Buckinghamshire we did 150. So there's, hopefully that'll be a benefit to the ones that we're planting today. Fantastic. So you guys, from what I understand, you find the seeds, or you climb the oldest sequoias. I think I've seen your son do this. You climb the oldest sequoias, which must be terrifying, 240 feet up in the world. You take the seeds and then you basically propagate them in your warehouse to then find new territories for them where you think that they will where you think that they will grow most successfully.
Well, we do two things. Our climbers climb. We've cloned over 130 different species of trees. All the champions are the largest of their species: sycamores, birches, maples, all kinds of trees.
Yeah.
But when our climbers go to the top of these trees, all of the trees that we tried to clone, the experts at the universities and the Forest Service said it can't be done. They're too big, they're too old, It's like a 110-year-old woman asking her to have a baby. It won't work. Well, they were right. Unless you go to the very top of these trees and out to the very end of the branches. And my son Jake discovered a thing called sun needles. It looks like a baby Christmas tree at the end of the branches, at the top of the tree. He brought those down, and lo and behold, we were able to clone 3,000-year-old redwoods and sequoias. They didn't go high enough. They didn't have the climbing skills.
That is incredible. So the seeds from the seeds from different locations on a sequoia tree have different fertility rates.
Let me finish. That's cloning the trees. So we take cuttings.
Oh, cuttings, right.
The very ends of the branches, as far up on the trees as we can go.
Yeah.
We bring those down, overnight them to the lab here, put them in mist chambers with special hormones, and we've been able to clone 3,000-year-old giant sequoia successfully, as well as 3,000-year-old coast redwoods. But now, you don't want to plant all of the same tree. You would have a monoculture and create a nightmare. Yeah. We also gather the cones. While they're up there, they gather the cones from these trees, bring them down. We ship them overnight back to the lab here, and we process the cones to get the seeds out. I'm happy to say we have about an 80% take on the cones, the seeds from the cones of, like the giant sequoias that you're going to receive, 3,500-year-old trees. Amazing. That are 33 feet across the trunk.
It's amazing. So
33 feet across.
So David, you're doing the cloning to get the genetic match of the oldest, most successful trees. Then you're also taking seeds, which will obviously be fertilized from other local sequoias around them, that will also be carrying phenomenal genetics for these trees as well.
Yes, and so we plan at the ratio of 10% clones, no more. Yeah. And 90% seedlings. Right. So you have genetic diversity. And by the way, what you're doing with your sequoias is the first ever of planting super groves, or seeds from the largest, oldest giant sequoias, all four of them on the planet. Nobody knows what's going to happen when they have sex and reproduce.
Yeah.
But if you have 7-foot parents, you probably won't have a very short progeny for children. So it's even more exciting. And what does that accelerated growth mean? That means uptake of more carbon quickly.
Right.
To offset carbon and create more oxygen.
Yeah.
And we're going to go after this climate change thing, and we're going to kick its ass.
Damn right. That's what we're doing.
Exactly what we're doing.
David, let's just focus on that a minute. I mean, over here in the UK, we've heard a fair bit about the wildfires in the US, and it's been really concerning. Can you tell us a little about what's going on, not just in reference to the wildfires, but how that's impacting the sequoia populations there?
Well, we first went on to sequoias about 10 years ago when I read an article by NASA. That's our National Aerospace Organization. NASA. NASA did a study of giant sequoias in California as a potential tree to grow indoors on Mars. But they found that the giant sequoia groves, which are very fragmented now, were dying. It was too hot, too dry, and they were in decline. So we said, well, if NASA says the sequoia forest probably won't live, through climate change for much longer, we better jump on the sequoias. So we did. The fires are from Mexico all the way up California, Oregon, Washington State, and in British Columbia. There's over 1,700 fires burning right now. There's millions and millions and millions of acres of old-growth redwoods and sequoias up in smoke. As a matter of fact, the trees that we just shipped to you, that grove, a 500-acre grove on the very top of the Sierra Nevada mountains, a private grove, just burned down last week.
And that was the two trees that you told me that we've had saplings from are stag, and I think that's the 5th largest tree in the world, and waterfall. You're telling me those trees were in the groves that have just been burned out?
Yes, and there's 2 trees from the very top of that mountain that are that size that our climbers climb You have some of those also. Those are burned down. The only one of the four that might make it, they're thinking that stag might make it, but that whole grove is now charcoal. So
they don't survive, do they? Because the wild, what I've read is that the wildfires, because there's been a lack of wildfires over the last few years, there's more fuel on the ground than usual, creating superheat fires, which they can't. Because I mean, everyone knows, that reads about redwoods. They're used to fire. That's how their seed cones open. It's part of their life cycle. But
not these kind of fires.
Not these kind of, and these redwoods are dying. Even the big ones, even the ones with 3 foot thick bark, and they've been around thousands of years.
Yes, because there's 10 foot of we suppressed all fires since the 50s here in the United States.
Yeah.
Smokey the Bear, that was the icon for fire prevention. We should have never did that. We should have let natural wildfires burn before the duff got 10 feet thick underneath the trees. And then it's hotter now, lots hotter now.
Yeah.
And we've had 12 years of drought in most of our redwood forests. You take any forest and cut off the water for 12 years, what do you got? And then we've lost billions and billions and billions of pines, all the way from Mexico, all the way up to Alaska with the pine beetle. So there's trillions of dead pines all over these mountains with the groves of the sequoias or the redwoods nestled in there. So when these trillions of pines that died from the beetles in the last few years took off, it's a tremendous amount of fuel that created super fires from hell.
Oh my goodness. That sounds like the perfect storm of tragedy for sequoias. You've got weakened by disease, you've got increased temperatures, weakened by climate change, which creates the drought, which weakens them to disease. You've got more dead timber creating superheated fires.
And it's all the redwood groves, all the way from the southern Sierra Nevada range, which is primarily the sequoias. The coast redwoods start in about the middle of the state at Big Sur, and go 500 miles north up to the Oregon border. That's all been under the same criteria also. So
it's tragic.
The whole it's biblical in proportion to this epic combination. And so it for the last 10 years, I'm glad to say some good news is that we've cloned 70 of the largest coast redwoods still alive on Earth.
Yeah.
And we're propagating them here. And we were able to do 6 or 8 of the largest giant sequoias before the fires took them all out.
Well, you guys, the work you're doing is so critical. For anybody watching this, you can actually go to their website and learn more about the Archangel Tree Archive at theancienttreearchive.org. And you should all go there and have a look at that. So, David, I mean, being, again, not a US national, one of the things I would have asked was, surely if you go further north, you can find areas that there aren't wildfires in, where there's cooler temperatures, or and certainly less stress for the sequoias. Is that? But you did start this conversation by saying the fires have extended all the way up to Washington State. So, sorry, Washington.
British Columbia.
British Columbia. So I'm sort of thinking that maybe that's not even a safe place either for them anymore.
Well, I think what we're referring to here is assisted migration.
Yeah.
Naturally or normally, a redwood grove can only move north 1 foot a year. Well, at that rate, they don't stand a chance. So we started planting giant sequoias as well as coast redwoods. If you Google up giant sequoia, you can see a map of where giant sequoia used to grow on the planet. They grew almost everywhere except at the poles on this planet, redwoods and sequoias. And there's fossil records. So with assisted migration, we figured we'd move them several hundred or 1,000 miles north to where it still rained, there was still rain falling, and still chances of fog.
Yeah.
And then, with 95% of the coast redwoods cut down, they're so valuable that we couldn't afford to put an armed guard for the next 500 years on every tree we planted. But pretty much that's what you need to do. So assisted migration, and we said, well, let's take a look at the geological map of the trees, their timeline, and we found out that redwoods grow better in Ireland than they do in California. I think the redwoods that we're planting in England
Yeah.
are doing better than the redwoods in California because you haven't had the rise in temperatures as well as the droughts that we've suffered here on the west coast of this country. So New Zealand, they do just great in New Zealand. Australia wants thousands and thousands of these trees. So we're trying to put them all over the planet where we think that their best chances to survive.
That's fantastic. I mean, I would say that, I know that there are fossils in the UK where we had sequoias here pre-Ice Age. It used to be native in the UK, certainly, and obviously not any longer. But then they have been successfully reintroduced at various sites all over the UK where they've grown successfully and proven to be a successful species here. It is really dramatic hearing from someone who's dedicated their life to this species, this tree, talking about their natural habitat as being non-sustainable. And, that's human activity, that's climate change, that's wildfires. It's tragic, actually, especially when they've been around these trees since before the Roman Empire or the rise of the Roman Empire, before, Stonehenge. I've seen your TED talk, even possibly before the pyramids, depending on whose opinion you take on that. Certainly not Graham Hancock's. So let's just talk for a minute about territories. Our project, One Life, One Tree, we're planting giant sequoias in the UK. We're doing that on the west coast where there's enough water, where the climate is pretty mild. Sequoias can take temperatures down to -40. They just need lots of water and good drainage, etc. So how do you feel about what we're doing where we're planting them in the UK and predominantly in Wales? Do you feel like that's a good future location for these trees? Is it as future-proof as we can hope it will be for giant sequoias?
I think it's probably one of the most important things that people can do as a population in the UK is to start to reforest the UK, where 99% of your old growth trees are gone.
Yeah.
You need to reforest the UK as soon as possible. Everyone, every school child, every adult, every government worker, with trees that will be able to stand the new climate as climate change progresses. The old way of doing things with the old native species will not work. It's too damn hot and dry.
And slow.
And slow. Yeah. You have to be more intelligent about this, like you are, and like your project is, and use trees that suck up carbon, CO2, sequester it 10 times faster than normal trees, which sequoias and redwoods do. 10 times faster. But the side of the coin that everybody forgets about is that our mammals and our fishes in our oceans are dying, our reefs are dying from a lack of oxygen.
Yeah.
We need to plant these trees not just to sequester CO2, but to produce oxygen, which is critically low in our marine life. So that's a side of the coin nobody talks about. So I applaud what you're doing.
Yeah.
You're working outside of the box. The old experts that are stuck in the past are not taking an intelligent look of the changing climate and weather and trying to adjust for that. I think that they need to sit down or move over and let the younger, brighter, more intelligent, scientifically based people help reforest your country and the UK so that all quality of life is increased for every living thing. And we need to do it now. That's my answer.
David, I've got an amazing statistic for you from what I've learned. So if you look at the UK estimates of natural woodlands planted in the UK over a 50-year period, they capture per hectare between 300 and 400 tons of CO2. And over a 100-year period, closer to 400 to 600 tons of CO2 per hectare. And when I started our project, I thought, well, obviously I've got to make a direct comparison to sequoias that have grown in the UK, but in isolation, so not in optimal conditions of microclimate with other sequoias around them. And so looking at the growth rates of sequoias in the UK, even in the first 50 years, a sequoia grove planted at 10 meter spacings, 1,000 square foot plots per tree, will capture 2 times that of a natural woodland. Over 100 years, it's 10 times that of a natural woodland. Over 500 years, the multiple just scales and scales and scales. And, we're in a sort of race crossroads here between how quickly can we develop technologies to, reduce dependence on fossil fuel burning and all of the things contributing to climate change versus how quickly can we sequester the carbon and slow the process of climate change. And it seems like Sequoias, when you start quoting 10 times efficiency on stacking carbon, it becomes really, really important. And it's, I often get challenged by people who say, oh, you should only plant native trees in the UK. And, first answer is, well, once upon a time they were native, and that's fairly subjective on the scale of time as to when you want to look at that scale. And the second answer is, at my conservative estimates of how much carbon these trees will capture, it's all about quality of land use. Now, the one commodity in the UK, and as I've recently discovered in the US as well, having looked at land prices to do our first grove there, is, the commodity in lack of supply is land, or more accurately, people who own the land willing to use it for non-commercial purposes, i.e. in this case, carbon capture. So the commodity we are lacking is land and willing landowners. And when we get our hands on some land, maybe through sponsor funding, or in our case, tree patrons, we've got to think, how can I maximize the use of that acre to capture as much carbon as possible, CO2 as possible? And on our conservative estimates, it's 10 times that over 100 years of a natural woodland. If they're growing at 10 feet a year in a microclimate, like you said, like you've described, my estimates, I was estimating 1.5 feet a year, 1/10 of what you are. So, at that point, it's such an aggressively, it's such a multitude times more efficient at CO2 capture that it's even more compelling that this is the species that we should be turning to in volume. And we always plant native trees at our Sequoia groves as well, because we don't want monoculture, we don't want to prevent biodiversity, we want to do the right things by the natural, by the local ecology. But to all of those people that come to me and they say, well, you should only be doing native trees, my answer is, listen to David. He's watching a species that he's studied for over 30 years in the States, falling to its knees, getting burned down, disease-ridden. It's, they're not enough water for them to survive, and this is going to be replicated in the UK, and all of these beautiful old ancient woodlands in the UK that still exist today, they're not going to survive climate change.
No, right? They're not.
So you've got a choice. You can either plant as many sequoias, and really sequoias, I think, is the answer, as possible globally to slow the rate of change, to protect the old forests by slowing the rate of climate change. I can't see that there's a better alternative right now. So I think our answer is we should protect the old native forests and ancient forests in the UK. But in the new space we discover and we can use for the purpose of capturing carbon, we really should be focusing on what the most powerful tool nature has offered us can do, and that's the sequoias. So, hopefully that you can follow that train of thought, but it's something I think about a lot.
Well, another thing you can think about is we've been asked by your queen to clone the 1,000-year-old oaks on Windsor Castle grounds.
Incredible.
They're pretty decrepit. They're being held up by posts and poles and things. I would take a long, hard look with experts of which trees of your native trees will be able to withstand the climate change, the increase in temperature, the decrease in rainfall, and through science and wisdom, find the 10 toughest, your best guess based on science, species of trees in the UK that will make it through the next 200 years. Yeah. And then find the largest and oldest of those and clone those and reproduce those and start planting those with your sequoias by the hundreds of millions. That's what I would suggest.
Yeah. I would love to be planting hundreds of millions of sequoias. We only started this project 18 months ago, so we're going to move as quickly as we can. Everything depends on, a lot depends on that and everybody else planting sequoias. But yeah, we do plant oaks with our sequoias. We know certainly in the UK they support more biodiversity than any other tree species here. And there's a place in the sort of hearts of the public here. The English oak it certainly captures people's imagination, along with sequoias.
As well as the Americans, it's called Robin Hood.
Yeah. I don't know which of your movies was their favorite over there. I think Kevin Costner always won it for me.
I think they're all good. I love them all. I mean, it's, what a folk tale.
It is a folk tale. It is great. So as we kind of wrap up, I think maybe I think one of the most exciting things for us today is, with this delivery of the sequoias grown from seed that you've sent us 50 of them to plant in our Wales Grove. Could you maybe share just a few words about the parents of those trees? I think you said to me they were stag and waterfall. I know you've seen those in person. For the guys that are going to be, guys and girls are going to be signing up to our project, I know they'd love to hear from you a little bit more about those two.
Well, there was a 92-year-old man that had a 500-acre parcel on the very top of the Sierra Nevada mountain range, as far south in that range as you can go. He wouldn't let anybody up on that 500 acres because he had giant sequoias 3 feet to 5 feet wider in the trunk than General Sherman, which is in Sequoia National Park, bigger and older than that tree. But it was a Native American sacred burial ground. Oh, wow. The leaders and the medicine people from the tribes in the area would go up underneath these big trees, and that's where they buried their dead. So out of respect for that, he didn't let anybody up there. He knew they were bigger and older than General Sherman and Sequoia National Park. But we went there 10 years ago. I sat down and talked to him, told him what I intended to do. And for whatever reason, he said, yes, you can climb them and try and clone them. Yes, you can take the cones. And so 10 years ago, we began that project. But imagine walking up to a tree, and I'm not good with metrics, that's 33 foot, a wall of wood, 33 foot across. How many meters is that? Or how would you?
About 33 feet would be, don't know. I think the largest ones, I mean, we work in feet here as well, to be honest. So I know what
11 yards or 11 yards. I think that your meter is about the same as yours. 11 yards wide, a living thing. 3,500 years old.
3 feet a meter, so that's about 10 meters wide. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, a wall of wood, 10 meters wide.
Yeah.
And you start to climb up that up to 270, 280 feet. And the branches that you climb past are 8 to 10 feet in diameter, or 3 meters in diameter, the side branches.
Wow.
That the branches are so big that the grooves on the top of the branches have collected dust over the thousands of years, and it has made soil, and there's animals and plants that grow in that soil that's collected from the dust, and you have miniature ecosystems all the way up this tree.
Wow, that sounds incredible. I'm extremely bad with heights, but I'll have to see that one day. So I don't know if it'll work.
We have developed 2 years ago, my son Jake, who heads up the climbers, invented an elevator system, which allows now, the BBC just filmed with us for a few days. It allows the photographers to get hook on to a waistband and get towed up 270 feet up into the canopy.
Oh.
One guy goes up as one goes down, so non-climbers and people that are afraid of heights can go up there and see what that canopy and what it looks like up there in a 3,500-year-old tree. I suggest you put some of the photos that I sent you of these trees on your website so people have an idea how big and how old these trees are. And just try and imagine that what you're about to plant with the trees that we sent over will be the world's first old-growth sequoia forest in Europe. It's never been done before. And we got the cones from those 4 trees that are all over 3,000 years old. So you have genetic seed of 3,000-year-old trees.
Incredible.
That you're about to plant the UK's first old-growth sequoia forest, which should be there 3,000 to 5,000 years after you get them planted.
Now
that's paying it forward.
Yeah, what an honor. It's for our children's children's children, really. I mean, first up, I'd just like to say thank you, David, for taking my first call to you. I don't know what it was, 3 months ago. Some plucky English guy phoning you up out of the blue, trying to get a conversation. You were so open and so open for discussion and to educate me on the stuff that you know, which I really appreciate. Um, Secondly, thank you for trusting us with sending us some of this incredibly valuable, um, the tree stock, the seeds that you've developed that are now from trees which may not even survive. I mean, that's a massively limited commodity now and very precious. And we will look after those and treat them as best we can to give them the best chance of survival in our environment. If you have any parting tips for us about what we can do to give them the best chance of survival, we're always open for that. You know, we think they should grow great here. We've seen the ones we planted already grow great. So yeah, if you've got any parting wisdom for us and our patrons, we'd gladly take that, and then probably wait until we get to have our next discussion when I'm hoping the trees may be 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet tall in a year or two.
Well, anyone that's watching this that has children or grandchildren, do it for your children and your grandchildren. Okay? They need it. Every year they're going to need it a little bit more, but take some time. And even if it's only one or two a year, start to put back for your children and your grandchildren's future where you are, what you can do, and start immediately because we're out of time. So hopefully we'll inspire you and your group to plant more because it's true, we're all working for the world's grandchildren. Right. And I don't think the Creator discerns that the grandchildren of the British or the grandchildren of the English or the grandchildren of the Canadians or the Americans are more important to Creator. I think they're all just as important. So we're working for the grandchildren, all the grandchildren of the world. And I ask for you to help us.
Yeah, we are all in this together. Couldn't agree more. David, thank you. It's been a very important moment in my life to have this conversation and to be able to share it with other people. Thank you. I look forward to when we next speak. I always enjoy it. It's a huge honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And it's been an honor for me too.
All righty. Take it easy.
Bye-bye.